I think that members of the House will agree that we should, as members, condemn in the strongest terms the threat of those rogue chiefs who are threatening the security of Canadians, their families, and taxpayers.
Tonight's top story, a standoff between Ottawa and the Assembly of First Nations. Aboriginal Affairs Minister Bernard Valcourt says he wants threats to the Canadian economy withdrawn before he will meet with what he calls rogue chiefs. Earlier this week, a group of chiefs threatened to shut down the Canadian economy if Ottawa did not withdraw Bill C-33, the First Nations Education Act. Anthony Furey joins us now from Toronto on this. And Anthony, it's kind of along the lines of you don't negotiate with terrorists. You don't negotiate with people that are making threats against you.
You know, Brian, this is all very unfortunate because it looked like there's a lot of progress being made. The two former Assembly of First Nations chiefs, Phil Fontaine and Sean Atleo, they are what I would call honest brokers. They are two fellows who understand that negotiations, political negotiations, coming to consensus, it's a slow process. It takes time, and you have to learn the benefit of a bird in the hand rather than two in the bush. And I think the First Nations Education Act gave some things that they wanted. Did it give it exhaustively? Was everyone happy in every particular all of the time? No. And unfortunately, we're seeing a rise of people who I think it's fair to call them rogue. I mean, these guys are elected to their respective positions, but they're rogue in that they say, my way or the highway, I'm going to burn the whole house down. And this does not help average First Nations people get out of their plight.
No, and I think that mainly they're talking about things like the extractive sector in the oil sands, which is the largest employer of Indians, Aboriginals, whatever term you're going to use, in Canada right now. Here's a statement from the AFN Confederacy of Nations. Should Canada not withdraw and cease all imposed legislation on First Nations without our free, prior, and informed consent, we will strategically and calculatedly begin the economic shutdown of Canada's economy from coast to coast. Now, Derek Nepinak has been the main spokesperson for this group of chiefs that want this legislation withdrawn. He was the main opponent of Sean Atleo and why Sean Atleo resigned. He went on Evan Solomon's show on CBC yesterday and said, "What are you talking about threats?" Roll tape.
I don't think that you're going to find any First Nations leadership across the country who are going to expressly threaten anybody. I think that first and foremost we have a treaty-based relationship. There are leaders across the country who would never try to threaten anybody. We're a peaceful people, we're a loving people, we're an accommodating people.
So, Anthony, is it fair to say he's not threatening anybody when he's threatening everybody?
You know, that statement, they've said, look, this was a draft of a press release that maybe we're going to approve later on May 27th. I mean, even if they don't, even if they amend it, water down the language, which maybe they will do, the simple fact that there is enough appetite to draft this to begin with is quite telling. Shutting down the economy of the country. And one thing we should point out, the Elsipogtog chief, he did not want economic participation in New Brunswick. He wanted warriors out blocking the streets, getting into confrontation. So the statement he says is not true.
The fracking in New Brunswick last fall. Okay, you call this, and you are correct, a draft. But listen to what Nepinak said a year ago in a news conference. Roll tape again.
The I Don't Know More movement has the people. It has the people and the numbers that can bring the Canadian economy to its knees. It can stop Prime Minister Harper's resource development plan and his billion-dollar plan to develop resources in our ancestral territories. We have the warriors that are standing up now that are willing to go that far. So we're not here to make requests. We're here to demand attention and to demand an end to 140 years of colonial rule.
So this draft statement reflects what Nepinak was saying more than a year ago. He's a radical that didn't like that Atleo was making a deal with the government. If I was Valcourt, I would not be negotiating with him either while he's making threats. Final thoughts to you.
I think that's completely fair. In an op-ed on the CBC website last year, Nepinak, he wrote that the First Nations Education Act was assimilation agenda involving racial superiority. These are people who want a fight. They focus on victimization and victimhood, not on empowerment, which is what the First Nations leaders who want economic prosperity are doing. My hat is off to them. I respect those leaders.
Yeah, I don't know how you get assimilation by saying here's more money and more autonomy, but I really don't understand Nepinak. Anthony, great talking to you.
Thanks, Brian.